and welcome back to this podcast counts as Socializing. I'm your host, Kayla, joined by my host, Abby and Nick. Hi, guys.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
That's sick.
All right. Well, that settles that. Let's hop right into it.
I guess so. How are you, Kayla?
Oh my God. Long week, but happy to be here. I'm glad to see you guys.
Even though it's been a short week because I had Monday off, it still felt like a long week.
You know what? I didn't even think about that. Damn, long week and could have been longer.
It could have been. All right. Well, today I'm hosting
really
this
are
episode. I
hopping into
guess. Wow. Yeah. I guess so. I guess before we like really get started, like we're gonna be talking about solar eclipses today. We've all seen a solar eclipse, right? We all watched the one in 2024.
We also did you see Total, Nick? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've all seen the big
total
one.
solar eclipse. I've even seen, so the year before, I guess it was October 2023, I got to see the annular one that went over New Mexico as well. And that was cool, but total was so much better.
Yeah, we saw the one in 2016, Abby and I, which was just a partial eclipse. Do you remember that, Abby?
Do you mean like it just like when everyone took off like for school to?
Yes, we were still in high school. Yeah.
Same.
And it was very like underwhelming. It was like, okay, that was it. And then the total eclipse. And then the total eclipse was like, this is a phenomenon.
Exactly. I know, because I saw the partial one.
This is what magic feels like.
Yep. I was in high school at the time too, and like, you know, had I been given the day off, I definitely would have gone to go see the total eclipse, but like they didn't give us the day off, and I didn't really know what I was missing. And I don't think it reached like maximum eclipse in Florida until like after school was out. So like I was home by the time, you know. So I just like watched it. But yeah, it's boring. It's like, oh, the sun has a bite taken out of it now. Big deal. Like, and cool, but
we've all seen the moon.
Right. It's really partial eclipses. If you're getting hit by a partial one and there is totality that you can go see it. It's worth it. All right. So with that, I need to share.
Abby, you looked like you had something to say, but you didn't commit.
Well, yeah, I didn't know because like I couldn't tell whether or not it was appropriate.
Relevant? Oh, appropriate.
It's probably fine. We'll
definitely say it.
Oh, well, I have a very a much more vivid memory of the one eclipse in 2016. Because do you know this story?
What does that mean?
Oh, it's not funny, but it's funny like in hindsight. Just because like, well, okay. So one thing that you guys, Kayla and Nick might know about me is that my parents aren't very good at like delivering news to me.
I don't remember. I do not remember what you're talking about.
No, so
I mean, only share what we can if there's details you need to leave out, you can tell us them like when we're not recording. But I want to know what you're thinking of.
We'll leave it in if you guys find it kind of funny too.
Okay. But you're like, I'll spill as long as you guys giggle, and if you don't, we can cut it.
Awkward pause, and I want us to act like it never happened.
That is deal.
But yeah, my dad. Okay, so yeah, we took the like a half day on school. So then like I came home, and then my dad was showing me like how like he would view the eclipse as a child, which was like you like take like a black sheet of paper, like a cardboard paper, and then like cut a hole in it, and then like you would see like the reflection of the sun through it, and then you could see like a shadow pass through.
Okay.
So you could see like the like moon eclipsing over the sun.
Yeah.
But or was it vice versa? I can't remember. But
I'm sure Nick will let us know.
I think the way that works is you like poke a hole in a piece of paper, and then it works like a pinhole camera, right? So if you have a hole, it creates an image that comes out the other end, so you can like see a shadow. And actually, I have a picture of the trees doing this. Let's see, at the very end of the slideshow. If you look in the top right,
spoiler alert.
Yeah, look in the top right. You see how all those crescent shapes are getting cast on the ground under a tree. So all the little gaps in the leaves make a little hole, and that actually projects the image of the sun through them. So you can see like the image of the sun through a hole, and it'll change as the shape of the sun changes during the eclipse.
I don't understand that though.
It's like it just acts as like a little camera. I don't know.
I guess I don't understand cameras, but that's a topic for another day.
If you have like an object here and the light is coming off the top of it, and you have a little hole here, right? The light coming from the top is going to only be able to go through a certain part of the hole, and it'll land down here.
Like it's going to be a block.
Yeah, and then you're
only going to see the light come through this small little hole that you cut.
Okay, so then what happened, Abby?
Oh yeah. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. So yeah. Okay. And then as we're like, okay, yeah. You hold it up to the sun to do it, to like get the light to go through and look at it. So like, you know, we're like looking at the shadow, and like, you know, he's like, tell me how you do it, you know, and then there's like a little bit of a pause, and he goes, your great grandfather died today.
His side or your mom's side?
His side.
So his grandfather had died.
Yeah.
That is not funny. That's so sad.
Yeah, no, it was like, you know, it was unfortunate, and like we knew it was, he, you know, was.
But yeah, you're right. The delivery of that was not maybe the best.
Yeah, not like when I was the most mentally prepared for it, but you know, if it was when he wanted to say it, then that's, you know, when he felt comfortable.
And I love that, like, I said, do you remember the 2016 eclipse? And you're like, in a way.
I was like, I think it's the one you're talking about, but I don't want to like talk about it unless it's actually the one.
You're like, oh, you mean the time my great grandpa died?
Yeah,
I do remember that one.
Yeah.
No,
yeah,
I remember I was like still at school, and I just kind of like looked out the window, and I was like, okay, and then I stopped looking out the window.
Eclipses have been viewed as omens by many cultures throughout history. So
did he die so he died on the day of the eclipse, right? Like not the day before?
It was like that morning, I believe.
That's kind of badass.
It is kind of cool. Not the worst day to go out. All right. Well.
All right. Ooh. All right, Nick. Educate my ass.
Well, with that, we're going to talk about eclipses today. So you might be thinking to yourself, what's an eclipse? And that's a great question. There are two different main types of eclipses, right? Depending on what's being eclipsed. There are lunar eclipses. That's when the sun or when the moon moves through Earth's shadow, right? So that's you got the moon here, you got the sun, and the sun is casting the Earth is casting a shadow in space. The sun or the moon happens to move through that during its orbit, and it gets dark. And then during the middle of it, it'll be really dim, but it'll be like red. This image here at the bottom is kind of overblowing just how red it gets, because it should be much darker. They've brightened this up so it's the same brightness as the other ones. It's much darker.
Enhanced for educational purposes.
Exactly. Lunar eclipses, they're kind of cool. The only thing is that they take forever, right? This whole thing is like a 3.5 hour ordeal. And like, I don't know, it just kind of looks like the phases of the moon for most of it, just like on the sped up time scale, and then it turns red, which admittedly, the red is cool.
And it would be kind of trippy if you didn't know that was going on and you're like, oh, full moon tonight. Wait, what the fuck?
And then like an hour later, you're like, where'd the moon go? I swear I saw it earlier.
You were like having like a time trip?
I don't know, maybe.
Of some kind? Like you were losing time and not realizing it?
I'd be like, personally,
2 weeks passed since I last looked up at the sky. I thought I looked at the sky 30 seconds ago.
I would probably just be like, man, I feel like the moon was full, but maybe I'm wrong. And then I would probably realize what was happening.
Yeah. The other day, I was like realizing how like gaslightable I am, because I was gaslighting myself so hard. I'd like come up from out of the subway. So I was looking at my phone to see like where I came up at. Like I didn't know what exit I got off at. And so I wanted to know what street I was on. And my location hadn't updated yet. So my location was still at my house. And so I kept being like, did I actually get on the subway? And then I would look up and it would be a not where I live. Like very different scenery. And I'd be like, no, I'm definitely not at home. And then I would look down again and be like, am I at home still?
Wow.
Did you Did you see the part where it says like how many minutes ago from your location?
No, because I had routed it so I could see like what train to take and stuff, but it was just like still at the very beginning of the route.
Right.
And it was still saying I was like 30 minutes away or whatever. And I was like, am I just now leaving or had I just left?
I see. Well, what if you did go through like a train like time loop?
No, because I do kind of remember being on the train a little bit. I was like, no, I was definitely just on the train.
You like got on for a stop or two and then like got off at the wrong time,
Yeah,
maybe?
like no, I no, I got off at the right location for sure. And like just a couple times looking up and down at my phone, I was like, I know where I am.
Mm.
Stop. I was like, just walk forward and you'll see the street sign confirming it. So I was like, stop listening to yourself, basically.
Hmm.
I don't know. But yeah, I was like, if you, all right, anyway, Nixon.
Okay.
Back to the day if you didn't
So,
know what this was.
yeah. I mean, but the thing too is like, lunar eclipses are fairly common. Like you get a couple of them a year. They're visible to the entire nighttime half of the Earth. So like these are a relatively common thing. Like even like ancient people would have known what they were, would have been fairly like used to them. They still would have been like rare enough that they might have been interesting or, a big deal, but they happen fairly often. And nowadays it's like, I don't know, I'm like I love space, love the stars and planets doing fun things, but lunar eclipses are the real fun
Damn.
stuff is a solar eclipse, right?
Wow.
Solar eclipses are when the moon passes between the Earth and the sun, and the moon's shadow falls on the Earth. You can see in here the umbra and the penumbra. The umbra is where you have the total solar eclipse, and the penumbra is where you have a partial one, right, where just part of it is blocked. And this is a picture of like, what happens, the whole time lapse thing. So cool, absolutely worth seeing one before you die. Like, if there's ever a solar eclipse in your area, you got to go see one. Very very worth it.
It's still so weird because even now as you're talking about it, I'm like, damn, Nick's kind of overhyping it. But I remember at the time before it happened, I thought that about people telling me to go see it, and then when I saw it, I was like, they were right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yep.
like I know that, and I'm still like, nah, he's overselling it. But it is so weird, like I can't even like explain it. It was just like
It's
nothing
such a
I've ever
cool
experienced.
experience. Yeah, it's such
Yeah.
a
Like just
unique
seeing like the whole
phenomenon.
like world in a way you've never seen it before.
Hmm.
And just
Yeah,
like everyone around you is like seeing that shit too.
weird shit starts happening. Like it gets really cold. The
The
clouds go
birds
away
are
usually.
weird.
The birds are a little confused sometimes. Like some people say their dogs get a little
It got like
confused.
so quiet and
Yeah.
dark and like
Hmm.
cold.
And it looks like there's like a sunset completely surrounding you too, which is really cool because there's
Yes,
still
I
like a
forgot
little bit
about
of
that.
right. There's still like a little bit of light getting into the atmosphere. And it's like just far enough away that it's like right at the horizon, so it looks like there's a sunset happening all around you. And speaking of, that's why the moon turns red during an eclipse as well, is because uh,
I meant to ask that.
it's only getting light through, like that's getting refracted through the atmosphere, and the stuff that gets refracted the hardest is the red light. That's why it stays red longer at
Oh.
sunset. That's why that happens.
That makes so much sense. If I'm ever asked that in like trivia, 100% chance I'm not remembering that.
And so the moon is basically just receiving nothing but red sunset light from the
It's
atmosphere,
only
and so that's
getting
why.
red wavelength light.
Yep, love solar eclipses. There's one in 2026 in Spain
Big
that I think
solar
I'm going to try
eclipse
to go
fan.
see, and also just like to take a trip to Spain would be kind of fun too. So gonna make a whole
Yeah,
trip
that would
out
be
of it.
really cool.
Lunar eclipses are a lot more common because the Earth's shadow is bigger, right? Like the Earth is bigger than the moon, so it casts a bigger shadow, and so it's much easier for the moon to travel through that shadow. And the reason that we don't get a solar or lunar eclipse on every new moon and full moon is because the moon does not orbit exactly along the Earth's ecliptic plane. So the plane that you can draw
Wait,
from
you lost me. Say that again.
so if you're looking at this little diagram here, right? So this
Yeah.
line here, this blue line points from the Earth to the sun, right? The moon's orbit is not perfectly aligned with that.
Oh, okay.
So that's why, sometimes during the year, it'll be a full moon, which means that you've got the sun, the Earth, and then the moon is over here, right? And so, like, you'd think that there'd be the right conditions for a lunar eclipse, but it might be too far below or above the Earth's shadow for it to actually have one. And the
Okay.
same thing on a new moon, right? Like, the moon is between the Earth and the sun, but again, it might be below, its shadow might be below or above the Earth, so we don't get a eclipse there.
Yeah, you're basically just saying like they're not always perfectly lined up because they're not
Correct.
spinning evenly with
Yes,
each
because
other.
the moon's orbit's not on the same plane as the Earth
Mm-hmm.
Sun orbit. A couple other things, right? Like there's a couple different types of solar eclipse. You can have a partial one where the moon does not completely cover the sun, and so there's still a piece of it looking like coming through. Can't look at that with your just with your eyes, right? You'll still burn your retinas. Don't do that. You've got an annular eclipse, which is
Did you include
where
the picture of Trump looking at the?
I didn't, but I should have.
Okay, I'll just look at it in my own free time. That's one of my favorite like things he's ever done.
It's really funny.
It's like top five
Just him
moments.
like going out there and squinting at it. The whole family too. It wasn't just him. It was like just.
I mean,
Like, you didn't, like, put on
Uh,
glasses at all.
what'd you say, Abby?
You didn't put on glasses at all.
Have you not
I
seen
think
this
he did
picture?
later, but I think
I
at the
think I think
start he
people had
was
to tell him
like,
to.
yeah, I think so.
They were like, "Sir, the glasses."
Yeah,
uh yeah,
yeah,
top five
good
moments for sure.
times.
Okay. Anyway, don't look at the sun regardless of how much of the sun is exposed.
Yes, if there's any piece of the sun that's visible, you should not be looking directly at the sun. If
Rule
the
of thumb,
entire thing is covered
don't
by
look
the
at the
moon,
sun.
totally fine. Yeah, right.
I just don't do it.
There are minutes in your life where it's okay to look at the sun. The rest of it, no. If you're ever spending more than a few minutes in your life staring directly at the sun, you're doing something wrong. Um,
Damn.
another another thing to notice is sometimes you get annular eclipses. So an annular eclipse is when the moon is a little bit further from the Earth than it normally is, and so its size in the sky isn't quite big enough to completely cover the sun. And so what you get is you get a ring of sun around the moon, which is pretty cool. I saw one of those.
Oh, shadow too
Uh,
small.
yeah, October
The shadow too
2023.
small eclipse. Okay.
Yep.
Do you have any pictures of that?
I don't think there's one in here of an annular eclipse
Oh, oh,
happening. We're gonna get to that. But basically, just imagine like this, where it's like the crescent, but the crescent goes all the way around. And
yeah. I was
it was
imagining it.
cool.
I just wanted to see it.
It was cool, but it wasn't like
It wasn't as good as the
nothing.
total.
Nothing compares to the total solar eclipse. Yeah,
Nothing.
and the reason that
Damn,
happens
Nick,
is
you need to
because
write poetry about eclipses. The way you
I
talk about
should.
eclipses is like romantic.
It, it was cool. I don't know what to say. It was like
No, I love the
it was such a
enthusiasm.
unique experience. Yeah, the reason that happens though is because the Earth or the Moon's orbit around the Earth is not perfectly circular. It's kind of an ellipse. So for part of its orbit, it's a little bit further away from the Earth's surface than for other parts. And so, depending on where it is in that orbit, sometimes you get annular eclipses, sometimes you. Okay. So that's like the general description of an eclipse. And now we're going to get into some of the history. Oh, one more thing. This is cool. This is what happens when the partial eclipse happens at sunrise or sunset.
That's
They
so
call it like
cool.
a devil horn,
Yeah,
the
that's what I
devil's
was
horns
thinking.
eclipse, because it looks like his little, horns coming up over the horizon. Super interesting.
No, but
Okay,
for ancient times when
so
I saw that, I'd be freaked out.
yeah, right. Could you imagine two
Any
little horns coming up over the horizon?
really any form of eclipse, if I didn't know about space and shit, I'd be like, well, it's the end times. The sun
Mm-hmm.
is fading.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about this a fair amount later. We're going to get into like how humans have thought about eclipses and stuff like that. Um, but like ancient people spent a lot of time looking at the sky, um, and so some of them would have known about eclipses. Some of them would have been familiar, especially with lunar
Yeah.
eclipses. Lunar eclipses happen common enough that most people would have been familiar with what that was. Solar eclipses are just rare enough and just scary enough that I think they really like had a huge impact on people that
Yeah,
saw them in
because
ancient times.
even like me, like I fully knew exactly what was happening, and while it was happening, I was still like, "This kind of spooky."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was just like a really eerie feeling.
Yeah, and they, most places on Earth won't see more than one in an average human lifetime, right? So like, it's totally within reason that most people would be seeing this for the very first time, and like having multi-generational records of like exact timings of these things did not really happen for a very long time, right? So like, there
That's
wasn't.
a really good point. I feel like another reason it was such a cool experience was there's very few things where so many people are experiencing it for the very first time together.
Hmm. Yeah,
Like of all ages, everyone was like, "This is something I've never seen before."
yeah,
So that was a really cool experience, and
yeah.
I
I
like
kind of want.
love seeing people experience things for the first time. So then you like also get to be in on it.
Right. I kind of want to talk about that more at the end, like
Okay.
all our own experiences with eclipses and like what made it so cool
Oh, the
for
way I'm
us.
spoiling it all the way
But
there. I just can't stop thinking about
I
it.
know, I know, I know. It's such a cool event. Okay, so we're gonna get into some history, right? Uh, it all started about 4.5 billion years ago when the Earth was forming, and a big ass rock about the size of Mars, and that we today call Theia, slammed into the young Earth. Right, so that's what's being depicted here. Um, so this was during the early days of the solar system when all the planets were still forming. There used to be a lot more planets, or protoplanets as they're called when they're still forming. And sometimes, they get knocked around in their orbits by other bodies' gravitational pulls and stuff like that. And somehow this planet, or this protoplanet called Theia, got knocked on a course that sent it careening directly into the Earth. And it hit it and knocked a ton of debris into orbit around the Earth that you can see in that top right image. And then eventually, over a couple million years, that all coalesced into what is today the Moon. Fun fact about the name of Theia. Theia was the name of one of the Titans from Greek mythology, and she was the mother of Selene, who is the goddess of the moon, of course. So they're being a little cheeky with their naming
I
on
like
that
those
one.
names.
Mm-hmm.
So, question. The basically the like conglomerate that formed from the debris is what made the moon?
Mm-hmm.
What,
Yep.
like, was it the pressure that formed it, or like was it like what was the like how did it all mold into one?
Yeah. So basically, when the solar system is like forming, it started out as just like a big clump of gas and dust, right? And all of that matter has mass, and so the gravity from all of that matter kind of pulls things together, right? And so the biggest clump that would form in the middle went on to become the sun, and then you have all these like smaller clumps that would have formed in like this disk of gas and dust around the sun. And all of those things would just bump into each other over time, and they would get bigger and bigger, and their gravity would increase, and so they would have a greater chance of pulling things together. And so that kind of happened on a smaller scale again with all the debris around Earth. Some of it would have fallen back to the Earth, right, and fallen as meteors and stuff. Some of it would have gotten ejected from the Earth Moon system and would have just floated around the rest of the solar system. And then some of it would have, clumped together and coalesced into a bigger ball under the force of its own gravity, and formed the moon. And yeah, so that collision too was so powerful that they're pretty sure it's responsible for Earth's axial tilt, right? Like the 23.5 degree tilt on its axis that it spins around.
That's
And that's what's
Wait,
responsible
did
for our
are the other planets
seasons.
not tilted?
So some of the planets are, like Uranus has like almost a 90-degree tilt, but a
Yeah.
lot of other planets,
I knew about
yeah,
Uranus's tilt.
mm-hmm, yeah, spinning on her side.
Damn, Nick. God damn.
I just said.
Oh, I would never.
Yeah, and so it depends on the planet. Some of them are basically zero. Some of them are much higher. Um, collisions were really common in the early days of the solar system, right? Like our solar system is very quiet now. It used to not be that way. All of the craters on the moon were put there by things, right? So like
Oh, poor
it
girl.
it was constantly being impacted by stuff, and so was the Earth. To
Poor
be fair,
Celine.
the difference on Earth is that it has plate tectonics and geology that reshape the crust, right? So craters don't tend to stick around super long, and aren't super visible on the Earth's surface because the surface is constantly being eroded and replaced by geology.
You know the Pixar like short that's the like volcano.
Maybe
It's like to the theme of Somewhere Under the Rainbow.
I don't think
This
so.
isn't this okay, this was supposed to be providing background for what I wanted to tell you, so just scratch that. But short idea, it's the moon over time as she's turning into herself, getting just hit over and
Mhm.
over. But there's also like a little song and maybe a love story. I don't know.
I like that idea. I like
Thank
that.
you.
What
Yeah,
Thank you.
like an
part?
TM, TM, TM.
Earth Moon romance kind of thing, but like the moon keeps getting hit by asteroids and stuff. And
Oh no, it's starting to not sound as cute.
Acting now?
well, I don't know. Actually, I think there might be some evidence that the moon protects the Earth from a lot of asteroid impacts,
Hell yeah.
because of its gravity does some stuff. So there could be something there.
But
Yeah.
but then why are never mind.
What were you gonna say?
Why are there more craters on the moon than on the Earth then? But
I
then
think I went over this while you were up, but basically it's because the Earth has plate tectonics and geology and erosion and plants. So the Earth got
And
hit by
plants.
a ton of various objects early in its history as well. But because its crust is constantly being reformed, they just don't stick around very long.
I see.
I feel
And
I I feel like I'm treating you like fucking Hank Green right now. I got a follow up question.
yeah, go for it.
Okay. I feel like I've got like theories of this answer, but not quite certain. So like, then why does Earth have like an atmosphere and like life and shit, but the moon is just moon? It's just made up of moon. Did it ever have like other shit going on there?
um, so it yes and no, right? So it
Because like in
had, I think it
theory, it's kind of the same distance from the sun and shit.
right. So the big things for Earth, like the reason that it still has an atmosphere and all of that, its magnetic field does a lot of work to protect it from the solar wind, which would have stripped off its atmosphere. And also the fact that it's much bigger, right, means it's much heavier. It can hold on to that atmosphere better, stronger. It's got more gravity. So that's a
Bigger,
big part of it.
stronger,
Um,
faster.
the moon doesn't have a significant magnetic field. I think it has like a very small one, but it's pretty minimal, and it's outside of the very protective part of the Earth's magnetic field. Um, but what's interesting is that the composition of moon rocks and the composition of Earth rocks are basically identical, and that's a big part of why we know, or why we're pretty sure that the moon was created by some big impact like this, because they're so homogeneous that like the Earth and the moon have to be made out of the same stuff. And the only way that really makes sense is if something big came in, smashed into the Earth, and then that shared debris that came off of the two of them made the moon, and whatever was left over made the Earth. Yeah, and there's some. I was reading about some hypotheses that the impact may have contributed to like kickstarting plate tectonics as well. Like it might have created areas of different density within the Earth's mantle, and that can be helping drive some of the convection and stuff going on down there. But I don't think there's been it's hard. It needs more study for sure. Um, yeah, and so what's cool too is like one, the Earth would have had rings for a little while because of that, that debris cloud would have eventually kind of compressed into a ring, and that before it all coalesced into the moon. So there would have been a ring for a while. That would have been really cool to see. Um, Yeah,
Did it, no one was around to see it.
that is true. I actually have a line in here later about like when eyes first evolved to be able to see it, but we're getting there. So yeah, I mean, before Theia, before this impact, right, there would have been no eclipses on Earth because there would have been
Wait,
nothing to eclipse.
wait, I have. Oh, I may have just lost it. But I'm so sorry. Um, what were we just talking about before? Is
The
um,
rings,
the rings.
eyes.
I'm sure it'll come back to you.
It'll come
I'm,
back. It'll come back.
I'm so sorry.
Wait, okay, wait, but I was gonna ask something and then Abby was about to ask, so now I forgot
You go
mine.
Oh
first.
my god.
Well, I was thinking about what yours could be, so then I stopped thinking about mine. Wait, so you said the thing about Earth. You said this thing about. Okay. So the other day, I saw people talking about, how the Statue of Liberty was bronze. I mean, like it was
Hmm.
copper, so it like looked
Yeah,
bronzy,
yeah.
and it's like says oxidized, so it's green. I saw people talking about like, oh, like imagine, seeing it when it was brown and like watching it turn to green, like that'd be something so cool to see. But a lot of people were like, I think they should clean it just once and let us watch it turn green again.
That would be kind of cool. That
I'm
would be
like,
kind of
yeah,
cool.
what? The only reason not to is it's probably so expensive to clean it.
Yeah,
But
I'm
like,
sure.
other than that, it's like it doesn't really hurt it. It'll turn back
Well,
to green eventually.
Also,
I
how
think
much
the
chemical, like air particles, is that going to release into the
I
atmosphere?
don't. Yeah,
yeah,
that
I
I don't
mean,
know.
cleaning it would be like a huge pain in the ass, and I think also the oxide layer helps protect the metal underneath from further corrosion. So if you cleaned it too many times, you'd end
Yeah,
up
but you
running
could
out
do
of
it
copper.
once.
You could probably get away with it once, yeah.
But no, that's how this came up. Is that's actually not true. It doesn't eat away at the copper at all. It like because it's oxidizing, like the way it's oxidizing, it's like its own new layer onto it.
Yeah,
So
but if
like
you were to
you're never like
remove,
losing amount of copper.
unless you were to clean it, right? Because if you remove the copper oxide, you're going to lose the copper with
Yeah.
that's bonded to the oxygen,
The
and
yeah,
so
the copper
eventually
that's
you'll run
making up the
out.
copper oxide. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you
Yeah,
can do it
yeah,
once.
yeah, potentially.
Yeah, no, literally the only reason not to is like that's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be insanely expensive, and
Maybe we just do like one part of it, like down like in a very visible location.
you could just like make like a smaller Statue of Liberty, like make a small
You're
replica and let
you're
her like
like you're
oxidize it,
like
like
you could just watch copper
like you
oxidize.
could do that too. You could make other things out of copper and
Right?
let them
It
oxidize
doesn't
as
have to
well.
be the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
It could be anything.
Yes,
You
it
know,
does.
you know how some like government buildings have like a big gold dome on them? I think they should do one of those with copper. I think that would look really cool.
Ooh,
So it
I feel
turned
like
like
there's got. I feel like I've.
it would
No way I haven't seen that before. I feel like I
I
can
feel like it
picture
probably
like kind of a
exists.
green big roof.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure there's copper roofs out there that are like that. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, before the Theia impact happened, there could not have been an eclipse visible from Earth, right? I mean, it's possible that like as
Right.
the impact was happening, we don't really know which direction necessarily it came in from. Um, but like it's possible if you were standing on the Earth's surface, it could have like covered the sun briefly before colliding with you. Um, or it could have passed through Earth's shadow on its way to hit the Earth. We don't really know. Um, but after the impact, there was all kinds of debris floating around up there. You probably couldn't stand on the surface of Earth because uh, it would have been molten. They're pretty sure. Like the moon would have been liquid as well because this collision would have released so much energy that like it would have liquefied the planet and the moon, which is pretty crazy. And but like the rings could have like eclipsed part of the sun sometimes. Like you would have seen like their shadow throughout the day. You would have seen like them get dark on the far side of the earth sometimes. It would have been really cool to see visually. You just would not want to actually spend any time.
Wait, hold on, hold on. I remember.
Go
I'm
for it.
so glad it
Go
came
for it.
back to you, Abby.
Me too.
Hold on. I'm so sorry, but I have to finish this nail. Um,
You're gonna forget.
I know. Hold on. Okay, so. No, okay. No, no. Um, okay. If we ever made contact with like people that like developed way sooner than we did, and like just now like got so like developed that they could like travel at like I don't know like speed, or like kind of how like okay, so you know how like our telescopes see basically like how many years
Hmm.
ago something is, like, you know, million, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Yeah, if
What
it's like 5 light years away, you're seeing light from 5 years ago.
right, yeah. So what if someone from like who like went through that timeline that distance away came to visit us and like brought photos of like what are like our Earth. It's
Mm.
like you lost
Theoretically.
like you lost your
Yeah.
child. No, it's not. It's not like you did that. But like, okay, hold on.
No, no, wait. Cook on it, Abby. Cook on it. I think you were onto
I
something.
agree.
Yeah, okay. What I meant more so, it's like someone bringing baby photos of like the child that you like only got to see at like when once they were 18 or something like that. You know, like,
Mm-hmm.
and then you
Yeah,
like
like when your friend's mom is showing you their baby photos, but you didn't meet them until you were an adult. So
It
like
was
you never
literally
knew them as a
me
kid.
meeting Nick's mom.
Yeah. Yeah, she does that.
Nick's mom showed.
But yeah, she does that. Yeah, I've got some good ones of Nick for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, don't give up hope. Maybe we'll be visited by people who took a photo of.
That would be pretty sick.
Oh, yeah, you're saying we could see this one day.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That, Abby, that is the craziest. Like, I'm imagining you being in, like, an astronomy class and them talking about this, and the professor being like, it would have been cool to see, but that's something no person will ever have the ability to see. It's just impossible. And then you raising your hand and being like, well, actually,
It's not
if we got.
technically
I'm
entirely impossible.
I would. I wouldn't say it like that.
No, I know you would have, but you'd be like, so what if an alien?
Okay, but like, not gonna lie, I am that person in class. I don't ask relevant questions.
Abby,
You
you're my
ask cool
nightmare.
questions. You
I
ask
know, but
interesting questions.
I will say though, when I was taking astronomy, he would use hot seat and just have people like put questions up, and he would like have it on in the beginning of class too, and people would just ask shit like this. Just be like, so theoretically, if an alien visited us and they had a picture from this time ago, could we see? And he would just go through and answer them.
that's awesome. No, there was one time in class where the professor it was a bone class, so you know I was excited,
Yeah.
and I'm like literally in front of the class too. Oh no, oh no! I'm realizing I'm that person.
The
Um,
way Abby and I are exact opposites in class, apparently. I had no idea.
when I'm there, I don't know, but also I hate it when someone's taller than me and they sit in front of me.
Mm.
Bitch, you're probably that person.
When I'm sitting in the front, I'm so sorry.
I know what? You just said, oh, I like to sit in the front. Bitch, you are the person.
And I took charge. And so,
And as you should, you deserve it.
okay, anyways, gosh, I'm just gonna keep digging myself a hole while we're at it. But
So
I
you're in bone class, you're excited, you're in the front row. Then what happens?
well, we learned that when
I thought you were just gonna say, well, we learned.
We learned.
no, we learned that basically you once you get your wisdom teeth removed, since you like most people get it removed at like a younger age, your jaw goes through like enough remodeling that it fills in the holes usually. Like you usually just like it just no longer.
It fills in the holes.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, what if like Planet of the
Oh
Apes
god.
situation kind of happened? And I didn't phrase it like Planet of the Apes situation, but like what I'm saying was it could be phrased better if I started with that. But like if it was a Planet of the Apes situation and like people or whoever whatever living higher intelligence was looking back on our skeletons, would they think that our evolution pattern sometime like somehow favored losing a third molar, and like it would like mess up our theory of evolution?
No. Abby, this is a really good point, and I'm so happy you brought this up because I think about this all the time with like cave paintings and stuff, where it's like
Mhm.
we take that as their history, and I'm like, what if was was fiction not a thing? Like they certainly had stories, or were just making art for fun. Like they certainly had hobbies.
Mhm.
So I'm always like, I feel like maybe we don't know the whole story on that potentially.
I think, well, there's like a lot of cave paintings that are like explicitly like, I don't know, I want to say like factual or like non, like you can kind of tell they're nonfiction. Like there's a lot
Oh,
of
for
paintings
sure.
of like
I'm sure there are
animals and
people that are
like,
much smarter than me that have like more knowledge about like we know this because of this.
yeah, well,
But
like
there's
one,
got to be stuff that they're wrong about also.
Although
probably.
I will
One thing that I
say,
think about with, sorry, with cave paintings is like, there's a bunch of like ice age mammals painted on the walls of caves in Europe that went extinct that we know were there because of the cave paintings, and we've also found like fossils. But like it's like very clearly like a woolly rhinoceros in like painted on like the walls of a cave in France, and like that animal is not there anymore. But then there's also a lot of cave paintings that are like handprints and like just random designs and stuff that are clearly like that's just definitely just people like messing around and making art for fun, most likely,
Yeah.
or at least in my mind, that's the case.
yeah, I was about to say, there's definitely like enough evidence of patterns that you can gather at least that like inform assumptions and theories. But at the same time, like stories are also a form of history.
That's true.
Mhm.
Like you could definitely learn something from like and like art is obviously part of history. Like why were they choosing to draw this way, or what materials were they like? You could still learn stuff from it,
Yeah.
but I do think a lot like I don't know. I just find it interesting like to like go off of that.
Hmm.
Um, but like on that same note, something that I think about, we're just like like kind of like misinterpreting the evidence is I think about like okay, if I'm going about like my day to day, right? I feel like I've probably told Abby this before. I think about like what were the places I've been and like what order and stuff, like what have my movements been that day, and if I were to go missing and they were like retracing my steps, like what are the red herrings in my activity right now? Like sometimes I notice that I'll go places in a really strange order because I'm like directionally challenged, and I'll be like, would they think I'm like thought someone was following me? Like I'm trying to like lose like someone tailing me, or like I'll
Mm.
like sometimes I just notice that I've done things where I'm like, this would look suspicious. I felt like I just like planted a red herring in this case that they're gonna be like, she strange. Why did she make that choice? It doesn't make any sense. Because I
Yeah.
hear that in cases all the time where they're like, she never like went there at this time. It's so out of character for her. And I'm like, I don't know why I did that today.
I think that's why it's like so important to have a lot of data points, because like one data point you can't tell anything from, right? But
Yeah.
if you have like a whole series of things, then you can start to look at the trends, and then you can like make generalizations based on the trends rather than
Oh
like
yeah.
just pulling an
Right.
anecdote from one specific.
For
And I
sure.
that gets
It's
back to what Abby was asking.
They would notice that
Hmm.
you're always lost and it's not special on this specific
Right.
day.
exactly, exactly. No, I've had that thought too, but I think you notice it a lot in true crime because like with especially with unsolved cases where it feels like there's no leads. It's like, okay, we went through all these logical patterns and trends and stuff. It's like, okay, what is maybe the thing that we're missing that we're not thinking of? So they start to like
Hmm.
really like you'll notice that they're really picking apart details of things where it's like now it's like, are we getting lost in the weeds of it? Like what is actually relevant? Because you're just like there we can't figure out the answer, so let's just try anything now.
Yeah.
But what did
And
okay? So circling back. What did your professor say?
Oh.
Did they have an answer or?
Yeah, but it's kind of embarrassing.
Oh, that is not where I thought that was going. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No, well, she was
I was like, and finish telling me about how you got embarrassed.
like, well, I can't imagine why. She basically was like, I can't imagine why we wouldn't have digital record of surgeries or evidence of surgeries. Telling that we probably would just remove them because of
Mm.
over.
I
Like,
love how I go, that's a really good point, and then spoke on it for like 20 minutes, and your teacher immediately goes, stupid ass point, digital records,
Yeah.
next question.
I
I
was
mean,
like,
there are like we are evolving toward fewer wisdom teeth, right? Like a lot of people don't have a full set,
Well, that's
So
why we have to get wisdom tooth surgeries because our jaws are shrinking in size.
right, yeah, and we're
Um,
not losing teeth to decay anymore.
Maybe we're just the same kind of autistic, Abby, because when you were framing that question, I was definitely thinking like, if we're hypothetically in a world where this is the only information, like
Well,
where you don't already know the answer.
like play with me a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, yeah,
ma'am, you
toy
missed
with it.
ma'am, you missed the goddamn point. I
Suspend
do
your
kind of love her
disbelief for
though.
1 second.
I do kind of love her. She was like, I don't want to talk about that. Next.
Yeah, I'm not letting this derail my lecture today.
I will
Sorry.
do 5 minutes. So yeah.
Yeah,
But
I do think, yeah, like if you were to look back,
she was like, if so, yes.
Oh, okay. So she did
yeah,
entertain it, but was like,
okay,
Yeah, but like not that. She at
yeah.
least answered it because she's a good professor. And very quickly.
Dang.
Because she's a good professor.
Okay. So unfortunately, for the first, the Theia collision happened 4.5 billion years ago. For the first like 700,000 years, or sorry, 700 million years, there was no life on Earth, right? Like there was nothing going on here. It was a sterile rock. About 3.8 billion years ago, we get some of the first life. Even then, though, like there would have been eclipses happening, but nothing could see them, unfortunately, because nothing had eyes yet, and that's going to take a while.
I didn't even.
Did they have photon receptors?
There probably would have been a little bit before eyes were evolved, but like we're talking, we're still talking a couple billion years before any of that, I think. Um, one little thing to note at this time, right? So when the moon first formed, all the eclipses would have either been partial or total eclipses. There were no annular eclipses. And that's because the moon has been slowly drifting further away from Earth over the last 4.5 billion years since its formation. And the reason for that has to do with like the tides and some interesting gravitational interactions. Not going to get super into it in this episode. Go watch a physics YouTube video about it if you would
Oh, I
like.
was
But
like,
yeah,
do you
it's
plan on getting into it in the next episode? Like,
no,
what does
probably
that mean?
not.
You're
We're
like,
probably
that's
just
episode
that's
two.
that's not what we do here. Yeah, but it's been slowly drifting further out in its orbit, and I think it's slowing down the Earth's rotation as well while it does that.
I'm just imagining Nick's episodes from now on are only physics, and so just for no reason, we all end up with a strange background knowledge of like intricate physics.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Wait, if it's slowing the rotation, does that mean that years are getting longer?
Years are not getting longer, but days are getting longer.
Okay. Okay, so not full around the sun, but the rotation of
Yes.
moon and sun. Okay, yep.
Yep, it's slowing the Earth's rotation around on its axis, but it's not slowing the Earth's orbit around the sun.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Thank
Um,
you.
Wait, like currently?
yeah, I mean this is still ongoing, right? Like the moon is getting a few millimeters further from the Earth every year. It might not even be millimeters. It's a really small amount, and the Earth is slowing down by like a fraction of a second every day.
Is that ever going to become an issue?
Nah.
I mean, not for us, obviously.
Yeah, it's. I
The
mean,
days are getting longer, technically.
yes, that's why like sometimes they have to add like a leap second every now and then. Um,
Okay, so they're like
Oh,
accounting
really?
for it, like on the
yeah,
clocks.
the
But
clock
I
people
just
are on
mean
top of
like,
it.
I want to know when we do that.
yeah, I want to be in on that information.
I actually like stayed up once to watch them add a leap second to the clock. It
So
was
you
like
can.
this was like my freshman year of high school. I think
Aw.
somewhere around there. Yeah, I think they do it at 2 a.m. There was an extra
Oh,
second. I was like texting with my girlfriend at the time, like, "Oh my god, they're doing it!" Like,
oh my God, they're doing it.
it's like 1 extra second. Whoa!
Nick is. Oh my god, the leap second is
Yeah.
Oh my God, wow, you were blowing up her phone. That's crazy,
She
Nick.
was up to it. We stayed up together to watch it happen.
Oh, that is so cute.
Mm.
But I think it'd be funny then, like on that day, to like if you had plans, like wait until it turns like exactly the day of the time change, and then like literally wait 1 second, and then walk and be like, "Oh, sorry guys, the leap second's just like it's messy."
You're like, oh man, I slept terrible last night. That leap second really fucked up my sleep schedule. I think that's a great idea, Abby. I think you're onto something. I'll let you
Wait,
know if
that
there's another leap
Abby,
second anytime soon.
that the joke implies that when we have leap day, it throws off your sleep schedule. Like, is March 1st really hard for you? Some like every 4 years.
You should take March 1st off.
You're like, damn, February really threw off my
You're
sleep
like, there's no
schedule.
February 29th. You're pulling my leg.
gosh, today's really good. March 1st, am I right? It is March 1st. Oh my god. Yes.
Mm. It's also okay. So one other thing, when the moon first formed, too, it would have been big enough in the sky that it may have blocked out the corona, which is like the thin wispy bits that you see during the eclipse. Um, that's like this thing here. So eclipses may have not actually been as good back when the moon first formed as they are these days.
Damn.
Unfortunately, we are kind of past like the golden age of eclipses. Annular eclipses are becoming more common over time as the moon drifts further away. First annular eclipse took place about 1.6 billion years ago. Nowadays, they make up a little over 50% of all eclipses. So, unfortunately, we are running out of total solar eclipses, but
I didn't know it was numbered.
there's like at least one or two every year. So there's still plenty to see in your lifetime. Nothing to worry
Okay.
about now. But
Yeah.
about 600 million years from now, the last total solar eclipse is going to occur. And it's probably going to be part of a hybrid eclipse, which is kind of interesting, where at the start of the eclipse, it's a solar or a annular eclipse. And then in the middle, it's total. And then at the end, it's angular again. And that's just because of the curvature of the Earth. Like sometimes that shadow has a little bit further to go and it doesn't quite reach the Earth. Okay. So, about 541 million years ago, the Cambrian explosion happens. We evolve eyes. Shit can be viewed now. We can see eclipses. Like eclipses can be witnessed on Earth.
Can we?
Admittedly, most of
Can we
those
do
eyes
Motherfucking
uh,
Cambrian explosion.
were
can we
probably really basic. Yeah,
can we
sorry,
like
Effie,
edit
go ahead.
like very dramatic sound into that? That's like a really
Yeah,
beautiful.
the Cambrian explosion.
Yes, yes.
You guys think I can edit when I can't even hit the export button? I can't even figure out how to upload. And y'all think I could
Yeah.
add in a sound effect?
Well, so be it.
Sound effect itself. You can make the sound
Yeah.
itself and
Do
overlap
you want me to
it.
redo that slide? You want me to go back and just go?
Yeah, I'm not gonna edit anything. I'm just gonna let you redo the slide so people can imagine what it would be like if you had done it the first time.
Mhm.
Epic explosion.
Reverb.
Reverb.
Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
Right.
Okay, I'm gonna hit him with
It's just
the.
8 seconds long.
I'm gonna hit him about 4.5 million or 541 million years ago, and then you're gonna hit the explosion, and then we'll say it. All right, ready? And then about 541 million years ago, the Cambrian explosion happened. So this is when multicellular
It wasn't
life
worth it. It
and
wasn't worth it.
eyes.
I went
It
into
was
it. Can you
perfect. No, it was perfect. It was
It
perfect.
was really good. It was really
It was
good.
really
It was
good.
really
I think that
good.
was perfection. Your life evolves around here, and we get eyes. We get all of the fun light sensing organs that exist. Admittedly, most of those eyes are still in the ocean, so I don't know how much like looking up at the sky they were doing. But I'm sure at least one organism viewed a solar eclipse from the ocean at some point.
You
Like it
really
had to
think
have happened, right? Like, come on. Like there's like a fish on the surface, like on its side, like dying or whatever, and it's looking up at the It could have
Yeah, yeah,
happened.
yeah.
I mean, you
Yeah, you make
got
a good
millions of
point. I
years to
agree.
work with, right?
You got millions of years to work with. Yeah, I agree.
Um, I mean, would they know what's going on? No. Would they care? Probably no. I mean, it's like we're talking fish.
We're
So the
talking
first
fish.
organisms to really recognize that something, interesting was happening, and but definitely the first to record it were, of course, humans. Um,
The
the very first,
humans.
the very first known record of a solar eclipse was one that occurred on March 5th, 1223 BCE, when a total solar eclipse traveled across North Africa, up over the Mediterranean, and into Central Asia. Along this path, you got the city of Ugarit, right here in what is today northern Syria on the coast. And it's recorded on this clay tablet up here at the top. And these are the runes in the top left. And then this is the tablet with the fragment talking about the eclipse. And I think it's so cool that we can like know the exact date that it happened on, because we can like project backwards with our models of the solar system to see when eclipses happen. So we have like multiple thousands of years worth of eclipses, you know, documented. Like you can see at
That
the
is
bottom,
really
the
cool.
5 millennium canon of solar eclipses. NASA has a website with like every solar eclipse that has ever happened on it. Um, yeah, I
That's
think
so
that's pretty neat.
it's hard for me to wrap my head around sometimes like how predictable planets and like space is. Like to me it feels like it should be much more chaotic. Like you shouldn't be able to like know the exact path of all of this shit all the time.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
I
and
don't
like
know.
that's the thing. Like it used to be a lot more chaotic because there was a lot more shit out there bumping into things, right? The
Yeah,
solar
and
system
now
these
we
days
know
is pretty
like
calm.
the exact distance the moon is moving away from the earth at like
Yeah.
I don't know. And math
There's
is
still
just
like
crazy.
a little bit of uncertainty, right? Like if you look at this eclipse path, you'll see that it doesn't actually exactly go over Ugarit here. And I think that might be just like a slight inconsistency in something's orbit, or like we're not perfectly accounting for some kind of little wobble here or there, because we know that the eclipse went over Ugarit, and we know it was this one because this clay tablet also mentions being able to see Mars during the eclipse, like near the sun, which you normally can't see planets that are visually near the sun during the day because the sun is so bright. So they're only visible during eclipses, and it mentions seeing Mars. And this one, they would have had a view of Mars when it was happening.
Do you
So that's pretty
think in
neat.
some ways, because I'm thinking about this because we have this clay tablet giving us so much information. Do you think in some ways our like records of our time now when looked at by historians are going to be worse like because we have less like physical media and then like the physical media we have is also not like written in stone, like the phrase is literally set in stone, like made to be read millions of years later by people.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think it depends, right? Like if a lot of digital data manages to survive in a form that's readable, right? They're going to have a future archaeologists are going to have a field day because they're going to have so much
Oh yeah,
information to
like
work
it could
off
be
of.
the
You're going to have so
exact
much context
opposite.
available. But yeah, if that stuff becomes unreadable or unusable over hundreds, thousands of years, like it may be way harder. It may be like way,
Yeah,
way
like
harder to
we could be
actually.
like the elusive time period.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but the thing too back then is like they weren't writing history,
No,
generally.
like
They were just like these were tools of communication, and like our tools
mhm.
of communication are going to stick around. Like they're not going anywhere.
I
So
mean,
like I don't know, maybe it'll be pretty similar.
do you think they at least valued the first of something, like seeing the first eclipse, like the first, and like someone probably of higher status had this like material here because they're
Hmm.
like, yeah, we have the person who recorded this. We have a
Yeah.
connection or something. Like I think, um, like maybe the reason it's like partially off from where it was found or where the eclipse may have been it's probably just like someone probably wasn't in the same location where they did it.
Well, that's possible as well, right? Like it could have occurred where the map is showing, and then that tablet
I
was
was thinking that
transported.
too.
But I believe that there was. I'm pretty sure I read something about um, this prediction being slightly off because it didn't account for something with like the Earth's rotation. I think it might be that because of the fact that they didn't account for the Earth's rotation slowing down over time. That like some of these older,
Oh.
um,
They got to
yeah,
add a
some
variable into their little
they
equation.
do, yeah. And what's cool too is like,
True, when they get it to the day, you
yeah,
gotta.
I mean, it's pretty darn close. Like they know what day this thing happened on. Um,
Wait, what year did you say again?
1223. It says minus 1222 on there. I know. I thought that
Okay.
was weird as well. So I did some digging. Um,
Oh, you were ready for me to ask.
the NASA website includes a year zero as having eclipses. There is no year zero. BC and BCE start counting from one. So it would be one BC would
I
have
never
been
even thought about what
zero
year zero would be.
on this. And so negative 1222 on here is actually 1223 BCE. Because I thought that was weird too, because like I kept seeing all these articles that were saying 1223, and then I looked at all the eclipses in minus 1223, and I was like, none of these go anywhere near the Middle East. These can't be right. And then I looked at 1222, and I was like, ah. And then I looked, and there was a zero, and I was like, okay, so that's why this isn't quite
That
lining up.
is confusing.
Yeah. And also, I don't. Have you guys ever heard of Ugarit before? Have you ever heard that city mentioned, or the Ugaritic
No.
texts? Have you heard of those? No. Okay. It's
Maybe that's just not in my realm.
maybe not. The Ugaritic texts are a collection of 50 epic poems written on cuneiform clay tablets, um, and they include like one of the big ones is the Baal cycle. The Baal, sorry, not Ball, Baal, two A's. Um,
Ball.
Baal, yeah.
Ball.
And this like around this time period in the area that we're looking at here, like in the Levant, you've got this whole like pantheon of gods. One of them is Baal, one of them is El, right? And this is kind of like late Bronze Age. This is when Judaism is kind of getting its start, and the Ugaritic texts like helped people understand like a lot of what was going on in the like pantheon of the Levant at this time. And like Yahweh, the god of Judaism, they're pretty sure he like assimilated a lot of characteristics from Baal and El into his like character. And then Baal likely went on to become Baal Zebub and then Beelzebub, who is like one of the devil figure, like one of the names for like what we
Oh.
think of as the devil nowadays in Christianity. And that process of like going from a deity to like an evil deity in a religion, they call that demonization, which I think is really funny because like it's like you were literally being demonized by the culture and religion until you are like conceived of as a actual demon. So yeah, that's a
That's really
fun
cool.
little tangent right there. So this was
That's a
obviously not the first.
fun little etymology
Yeah.
tangent.
Uh-huh. This was of course this was not the first solar eclipse that people ever witnessed. This is just the first one that we have written records of. Um, and part of the reason for that, Ugarit was a pretty big trading
Sure.
hub in the Eastern Mediterranean at the time. They had a lot of contact with other cultures in the area. There was a lot of trade happening. Right, they're interacting with the people that would become Hebrews. They're interacting with like North Africa, Greeks, Romans, all that kind of stuff was going on at the time. I guess not the Romans yet, but like the people that lived in that area. Um, and the have you heard of the Bronze Age collapse before? Like that kind of time period or that series of
Nick, let's
events?
just assume I haven't heard of things before.
Okay. So the Bronze Age collapse was like, it's not really like one specific event, but there was kind of a trend toward the end of the Bronze Age, right? Where a lot of like big societies and like sophisticated societies with complex agriculture and social hierarchies and stuff like that, a lot of them kind of disappeared. So like we're talking like Babylon and the Assyrians and all of these groups across the Middle East and the Mediterranean just kind of like disappeared. Not like fully disappeared, but they just like stopped building like big cities and doing agriculture on really large scales and all that stuff. And they call it the Bronze Age collapse. And the collapse of the Ugaritic society occurred like pretty soon after this eclipse happened. So we have like really accurate dates on around when that happened because we know when this eclipse happened, which I think is like super cool. So like they know what
That's a
happened
fun
within
way
like
to
I
like
think it's
yeah to like date something.
yeah, right. Like I think it happened within like a couple of years. I don't remember exactly, and I'm not a historian, so
Wait, so
like,
back to the Bronze Age collapse. Why?
why did it happen? That's a whole can of worms. I think there's still a lot of debate around it. I think a lot of
Okay, so it's like a
people
mystery still.
a little bit, and I think a lot of people argue that it was less of a collapse and more of just
Restructuring.
like hierarchical society broke down, but like the people were still there. It's not like everyone like died and disappeared.
Yeah, like it
Um,
wasn't like it wasn't like a Roanoke situation.
yes, exactly, and it was
It added to
yeah, it was like a
cost.
series of famines that happened. There's this whole thing with like various texts reference the sea
I
peoples
just
coming and
realized real fast that I
invading,
shouldn't
and
have laughed.
you should go look up the Bronze Age collapse on your own because it's a whole huge topic, and I am
You
not
said
qualified.
educate yourself and come
I am
back.
not qualified to like get into it, and I don't know enough about it to really get into it. Okay, so next
Thank
up,
you.
right? Over time, people start, taking note of all of the eclipses, both solar and lunar, that are happening. And they start writing it down and they start noticing patterns in their records. So the most notable pattern in eclipses is called the Saros series. So a Saros is a unit of time and it's equal to 223 synodic months. And I know you're sitting there and you're like, what the hell is a synodic month? That is the
Nick, I didn't
amount of
understand
time.
a single word for like at least 30
Yeah.
seconds.
A synodic month is the amount of time that it takes for the moon to complete one full cycle of phases. So it's 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, and 2.9 seconds, right?
So it's
You'll
basically
notice
it's a lunar month.
it's a lunar month, exactly. A synodic month
Bitch,
is a
just
lunar
say
month.
that.
Well,
That I understand.
okay, sorry. That's everyone calls them synodic months. I'm sorry. That's the official term for it.
Okay,
And
Mr.
a
Fancy Pants.
And
That's a big word for Elmo.
the Saros is 223 lunar months, which means it's like 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. Um, and you'll notice that that is not an even number of days, right? There's an extra 8 hours thrown in. So what happens
I
is
did notice.
you get a very similar eclipse every 18 years, 11 days, but it's slightly further around the Earth. It's about a third of the way around the Earth from where the last one was because of that extra 8 hours. And this horrifying but kind of beautiful graph here is the Saros Inex panorama that some guy drew in 1955. That's plotting all of the eclipses for the next I don't know exactly how long, but many years. And you can see so each of these columns is a Saros series. Um,
Oh my
and so like
god.
if you look
That's
at
so
these,
hard
right,
to read.
these are all partial eclipses, and then like the red is partial eclipses, and then this purple is all total eclipses, and then the
Wait,
yellow.
explain for the listeners like what this layout looks like and everything, and also for me.
Yeah, so I'm not like super familiar with what everything on here means, but
Start with the X and the Y.
yeah, so okay, so the
And
the
like
columns.
the title.
Yeah, so it's the Saros Inex panorama. A Saros series is that length of time we were talking about earlier. It's 223 lunar months, 18 years, 11 days, 8 hours, right? So each of these steps is one more step on the Saros series, right? That's on the
Okay.
vertical. The horizontal is each of these rows is an Inex series. And there's another thing where like if you go even further, like a certain number of lunar months corresponds almost exactly to a certain number of Earth days. And so you end up with another series of eclipses that happen in a similar location on Earth. Um, but what's cool about this is like some of the patterns that you see, right? So like
Hmm.
Saros series start and end. They last 1,500 years ish on average. Um, whereas the INEX series tend to be much more stable because they're much closer aligned to a whole number of days. And they can last for thousands of years. And they tend to alternate partial or annular total, I believe. Yeah, annular total, annular total. Um, whereas the Saros series tend to start with a period of partial eclipses followed by total eclipses, and then sometimes you end up with some annular in there depending on the particular series. It's kind of a mess of a graph, but it's pretty cool. I think
It's
it
a
looks pretty
terrible,
neat.
terrible graph.
It's hard data to visualize, to be fair.
Yeah. And like I think that this is definitely the best you could do. But yeah, you definitely need
Yeah. It's also in really
like
low
a
resolution.
website.
Like, I'm pretty sure this is a scan from a book from 1955, so like that's also contributing to it a little bit. And I could not find for the life of me a higher resolution version of this on the internet.
That is so
Nick,
funny.
So
Probably like no one everyone's like, "Yeah, I'm not making that."
yeah, right.
Nick, wait, hold on. Could you explain the what the bottom leftmost point means and what the bottom rightmost point means?
So like down there and up there in the
Yeah.
corners. I think they're just arbitrary start and end dates, if I remember correctly. I think they kind of centered it on. Well, I think
Well,
the
like
most
the
recent
first,
eclipses are somewhere in here.
first data point.
Uh, yeah. So I believe this is Saros Series One. This is Saros Series Two. They've labeled them all starting at some arbitrary point in time. And each data point is an eclipse, a potential eclipse that could happen.
Okay, yeah.
So like the white ones are years where there was no eclipse, right? Uh, the reddish outline, these are all partial eclipses, and then the purple, the teal, and the yellow are total annular and hybrid eclipses, depending on which one you're looking at. So each of these dots on here is another eclipse. Yeah. And so this is like, modern times we have this, right? This is what we're able to do. If we go back to this hunk of bronze was discovered on a Greek shipwreck, an ancient Greek shipwreck. Let's see, sorry. It was discovered on an ancient Greek shipwreck that probably wrecked sometime in the first century BCE. And the Greek astronomers at the time had apparently perfected eclipse prediction because this thing calculates Saros series, and it is used like this mechanical calendar because it was basically like a mechanical calendar. Um, could predict solar and lunar eclipses based on that Saros series, and I think that is so cool. Like,
How
obviously,
would
people had spent enough
yeah.
time recording eclipses to the point where they like knew with like pretty decent certainty when there would be eclipses, and then were able to build a mechanism that would show you when the next one was if you like wound it a certain distance. And I don't know, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, so like how do archaeologists find that out?
They studied um they like took x-rays and scans of the mechanism, and like they could tell that like there was like you could tell like the different ratios of gear teeth, and those ratios lined up with like the ratios of like a day to a lunar month and a lunar month to a Saros and all of that stuff. So they could figure out, okay, this must have done this and this and this.
That's so cool.
And there's actually a guy on YouTube. The channel is ClickSpring, and he is working on this like multi-year long project to reconstruct the Antikythera mechanism, because that's what this thing's called.
Damn.
Damn.
He's been working on it for a while. Uh, he's using some like hand tools and stuff too, which is really neat.
That's an insane side quest.
Phenomenal video, phenomenal series of videos. Highly recommend checking those out if you get the chance. He's also Australian, has like a phenomenal voice, so like, just one more reason to go check it out. But I think it's so cool because like, I don't know, the fact that we found this on one ship, like it probably was not uncommon to have these kinds of mechanical
Why did they need
calendars.
to know that?
Well, I mean, it's always good to know like what day it is, but I
Oh,
don't
it's just to, like
know.
keep track of the days in general.
Well, it could be, but the fact that it could predict eclipses, like I suspect that eclipses were pretty important, events. I think celestially, and the Greeks loved their stars and planets and naming them after gods and goddesses.
Yeah.
And I think that it probably was like seen. It could be seen as like a good or a bad omen. Maybe you didn't want to sail on the night of a lunar eclipse. Maybe you didn't want to do anything on the day of a solar eclipse. Maybe that was a day for sacrifices or something like that to Apollo or Helios or
Hmm.
whatever. And you know, I'm not sure we know exactly why, but like people
Maybe it
obviously
was just a passion project.
could be. But I feel like the fact that one of these survived, there were probably more than one of these around, right? Like
Yeah,
this
it'd
may
be
have been
kind of
a
pretty wild if it was the only one ever made and it lasted this
yeah,
long.
yeah. Like there were probably a lot of these, like on a lot of ships. Like it was probably a pretty common thing that you just needed to know when the eclipses were so that you could do things correctly. And I think it's so interesting too. Like clearly, people had a lot more time to stare up at the stars and like keep track of this stuff. I
True.
think, frankly, um,
Well, especially like
especially
who sailed. Yeah.
yeah, well, and especially like outside the agricultural seasons, I think people had a lot more free time back then. Like we work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week these days, and like that's better than it was 100 years ago. But if you go back far enough, like people just didn't work the way that we do, especially in like the winter and seasons where you were not growing food. Like,
Mhm.
you were sheltering in your home and staying
Yeah,
warm and
I
staying
wish we
dry. And
hibernated through the winter.
yeah. So I think some of it is that, like, what else are you going to do at night? There's not really
What
any
else you gonna
artificial
do at night?
lighting. You just kind of lay
Yeah.
there and look up at the stars. Um, and I think people also tended to be awake more often during the night. I think our sleep schedules these days, we tend to sleep in like one big chunk. I've seen a lot of people talk about like ancient people used to sleep for like 3 or 4 hours, get up in the middle of the night, and then go back to bed for another 3 or 4 hours. There was usually like a period of wakefulness in the middle.
That's insane.
So like they may have just
It's so hard to get up and to fall asleep again.
well, but I think if you were like on that like sunrise to sunset schedule, like you probably would be more adjusted. And also if you weren't working 8 hours a day every single day of the year, I think you might be slightly better rested.
Yeah, they probably were like, okay, midnight snacky time.
Hmm.
they
Yeah.
were getting up to
Also,
smoke.
so like the stars, planets are all very important in tracking the seasons, right? So
Hmm.
like you need to know when the growing season is, and you can't just like pull up Google and see what day it is. So it's really important to keep track of, when certain constellations rise, how long the days are, that kind of stuff. So like people were very in tune with the movements of the heavens. Think about like the solstices, like solstice celebrations are a huge deal in so many cultures everywhere. The longest night of the year, that like once you make it past the solstice, the days are getting longer. You're heading back toward the growing season. That's like a huge reason for celebration and feasting. You've got like the zodiac, which was a way of tracking the months, basically. It's what constellation the sun rises in or the moon rises in, etc. Um, and so, like, yeah, people were keeping their eyes on this stuff, and especially with the lunar eclipses, because I forgot to mention this earlier, but the lunar eclipses and solar eclipses both follow Saros series, right? Because if you think about it, like they're basically the same event. It's just that one of them, the moon is on the other side, and the reason that we have so many fewer solar eclipses is just because the moon is smaller. Um, but lunar eclipses are way easier to track too because they're visible not just from one tiny patch on the Earth's surface, they're visible from the entire nighttime half of the Earth. So, if you're tracking those, you only need a couple of decades worth of data before you can really start to put, a model together of how when they occur. Versus solar eclipses, you may need hundreds of years to really nail down the numbers. But yeah, I mean, by 100-ish BCE, the Greeks apparently knew when eclipses were. I touched on this a little bit earlier. Because solar eclipses are such noteworthy events, they tend to be really useful for dating historical records. Like, if people are seeing the sun get blotted out and the sky go dark in the middle of the day, like they're gonna write it down. Like it's significant enough that you're gonna like tell people about it. You're gonna write it in your journal. You're gonna like make a
Yeah, that's
clay
really
tablet about it.
interesting. I didn't think about that aspect.
It's a big deal. Like
And then like you
that's gonna
add
be a
in
big
that
thing.
it's something that we can easily track.
Yes, and because now we know the dates of every solar eclipse going back
Mm-hmm.
a few thousand years, we can line up ancient calendars
Mm-hmm.
pretty accurately based on when they recorded solar eclipses happening. Like,
That's really cool.
yeah, the Ugarit eclipse earlier helped us date the Bronze Age collapse of the city. A lot of ancient Chinese calendars have been accurately aligned to the modern ones because the Chinese were really, really good about recording solar eclipses, all that good stuff. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit now about different culture groups and their ideas about eclipses. Um, some of this is, very well supported. We've got like textual data for it. I mean, a lot of places we just don't know, so there's a lot of speculation involved too. But like in the Jewish Talmud, solar eclipses are described as ill omens, and several events in the Hebrew Bible are said to have occurred during eclipses. Like there's like destructions of cities happening and other stuff like that, right? In some Hindu mythology, solar and lunar eclipses are said to occur when celestial gods Rahu and Ketu swallow the moon and sun, respectively. I think that's pretty fun. In Aztec mythology, solar eclipses are said to occur when the jaguar god Tepeolotl consumed the sun and threatened to swallow it completely. And in ancient China, a lot of times they were seen as omens pertaining to the health and life of the emperor, and yeah, geez, failing to predict an eclipse could spell disaster for the emperor. So he would like have people whose job it was to predict the eclipses. Um, and I guess somehow, like if you predicted it, and I guess maybe did some kind of ritual, like you could avoid the doom or something like that.
That's
Um,
interesting.
If
yeah.
you're trying
And look,
something.
these are like cherry picked examples of eclipse stuff, but like every
Yeah.
culture probably had some kind of different conceptualization of things. Um, and one culture which I would like to talk about now is Chaco Canyon. So, Chaco Canyon is located in what is today northwestern New Mexico. And we it's a really, really cool archaeological site. I have not been yet, but I plan to go in the near future. It's supposed to be really cool. These are the ruins that we're looking at right now. Um, like you can tell, like this was a huge, huge complex of buildings right here. Like that's a lot of construction involved at this place. And it's pretty clear from some of the archaeological sites that they found in Chaco Canyon that observation of the sun, moon, and stars was super important to this place. A lot of the buildings in Chaco Canyon have alignments with significant astronomical events, such as like solstices or the lunar standstill, a couple other different common alignments that you see some places. This was a pretty interesting community and definitely like a major cultural hub. It was inhabited from roughly AD 850 to 1250, and they know that because the desert is really good at preserving wood and dendrochronology. I don't know. Have you guys heard of dendrochronology before?
Is that the study of trees?
It's like
Time.
tree ring dating. Yeah,
Ha ha ha.
that
You are
was nice.
The way Nick too, you don't understand how like so zoned out I was, and then I snapped back in with that answer. It was like I
Yeah,
got
so
called on in class and I wasn't paying attention, and I was
mhm.
like, "Bitch, I know the answer."
Yeah, so the wooden beams that were used in construction at this site are like really really well preserved because it's super cold and dry, and like things just don't rot out there. So they've been able to really accurately date a lot of the construction activities at the site, which I think is really cool. And yeah, Chaco Canyon, like this is only one of the sites within the canyon. What's so
I'm
funny?
so sorry. I'm so sorry. We're not laughing at you. Abby
It's just
and I are just making each other laugh.
eye contact for some reason. Kayla, every time we make eye contact, she makes a face. And I try to
Because
make
you're making a face. Ugh.
because like we just connect at the same time, and like we both just like
We just like lock in on each other, and then I'm like, it feels like we're in school and we're not supposed to be talking to each other, which is making it funny. And like, I want to talk behind Nick's back to Abby.
Mhm.
okay.
Go
All right,
ahead,
I'm locked
tell
in.
her. Okay. Where was I? Oh yeah, so Chaco Canyon, huge site for the time. Like this is just one of the sites in the canyon, and there are like hundreds of rooms, big courtyards, and like a lot of kivas, which are these like underground structures that the ancestral Puebloans built, and that a lot of Pueblo and Navajo people, or sorry, not Navajo, a lot of Pueblo people today still build. Kivas are basically like circular underground structures, which were used for ceremonies and social activities and stuff like that. I've been in one. They're really, really cool. Um, Both like, cool and also like lower temperature than outside. Because I went in one in like the middle of summer and it was probably like 20 to 25 degrees cooler down there, which was really cool.
That's really nice.
Yeah. So like it makes sense to put your social gathering space underground in the desert, I guess, because it makes it a much more pleasant place to be. Um, there's a really cool video by Ancient Americas if you want to learn more about Chaco Canyon. Just look up Ancient Americas Chaco Canyon; it'll come up. Um, and they found some burials at one of these sites with macaw feathers that were transported all the way up from Central America. They have found a whole bunch of like other really interesting and expensive burial goods like turquoise, copper, gold, chocolate, which would have come from South America as well and been traded all the way up to northern New Mexico. Seashells that would have come from the coast, all kinds of like really interesting stuff like that. It's also like kind of a weird space because while like there's all of these giant structures, they doesn't seem like they were super inhabited all the time because there's not a lot of like trash piles. They call them middens usually. There aren't very many middens in the area, and there aren't a lot of hearths in a lot of the buildings, which is weird because like I mean you can see in this picture there is snow. Like this is it may be the desert, but it's still at like 6,100 feet above sea level, and it gets cold in the winter. So, like, you would expect a lot of hearths everywhere if people were actively occupying them, especially in the winter.
Maybe they
So
were
it's
doing a little migration
yeah,
situation.
that's kind of what people are thinking is like maybe these they call them great houses. These things with all the rooms, right? They think that they may have been like gathering spaces in the summer or maybe during the agricultural season. They would live there and work and do things together as a larger community during that time of year. And then they would spread back out to their whatever, their, winter home or something like that in the winter. Who knows? Um, but yeah, it's a really cool archaeological site. I'm going to go visit it at some point. Haven't gotten around to it yet, but yeah.
How far from it are you?
It's like 2 or 3 hours from Albuquerque, I think. This is another picture of one of those great houses. So, like, you can see, like, this was not like a single story building. This was a multi story building with,
Oh, that's a
like,
big house.
yeah, I think the largest one had like
It
something
looks
like
like a
600,
castle.
600 rooms or something like that. Yeah, it's a huge structure. Um, and like I mentioned, the people of Chaco Canyon, they spent a lot of time studying the stars and stuff. So they think that this petroglyph here, right in the middle, that looks like a sphere with like little tendrils coming off of it, or a circle with little tendrils coming off of it. Some people have suggested that this might be a depiction of a solar eclipse, which I think would make a lot of sense, right? That kind of looks like the corona, at
Mhm.
totality when you see the wisps and stuff. And that circular dot above and to the left of what they think is the sun could be Venus. And that would line up with this eclipse in the top left, which happened on July 11th of 1097 AD and would have gone right over this area. So, I mean, it's not definitive proof, but like
I would
there's a
say like
pretty.
yeah, like it could be. It
It
could
certainly could
not
be.
be. It's
Yeah.
giving ancient aliens.
I mean,
It
I
is
kind of get
giving.
that.
It is giving. Is this a spaceship?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting too is like we have a lot of petroglyphs from ancestral Puebloans, and like I think this is a relatively unique um, glyph, like this one with the circle with
Yeah,
the
like they
tendrils
hadn't seen
coming
it
off of it.
before in a lot of
Yeah,
ones.
like you see the human figures carved around it, and like some of this is more modern graffiti, right? But um, you see a lot of like people with bows and arrows. You see a lot of deer carved. You see a lot of like
Hmm.
there's some like deities that
Similar motifs
show up repeatedly.
happening
Yeah, similar
throughout the
motifs that are
artwork
present across all kinds of different ancient Puebloan sites, and this one is pretty unique. And what's cool too is
because it's alien.
it could be the 2023 annular eclipse was also visible from Chaco Canyon, which I think was pretty cool. Just to tie that back to modern day as well. And another really really interesting thing that is in Chaco Canyon is this thing right here. They call this the Sun Dagger. Um, it is a solar calendar, which I think is so cool. It was only discovered like relatively recently, but it tracks the seasons based on where this like line of sunlight falls on the spiral here. And you can see like in the bottom right here, on the summer solstice, that sun dagger is right on the center of the spiral. During the equinoxes, it falls on either side, and then during the winter solstice, there's actually two lines, and they fall on the outside edges of the spiral. And like these are these. This is what the sun dagger looks like from the outside. It's these three rocks that are stacked just right, and I think that is like one of the coolest things ever. Like it went unnoticed for so long because like it's just like a shadow on the rock, but
Yeah, like it
people
doesn't look like
realize like oh my god,
it
like
would be
there's
anything significant, but it's literally telling
yeah,
time.
it's a
That's so
very very
intricate too.
accurate. I know, right? Isn't that awesome? And like the fact that
I
there's
didn't
two
realize
daggers on
until
the
I
winter
like
solstice and one on the summer. I
yeah, I
don't know. I
didn't
think that's.
realize how like complex it was until I like really looked at this diagram because I was just looking at
Mhm.
like what the sun looks like and I was like, okay, so it's just like a slit in a rock.
Yeah, but no, it's yeah, it's a really really cool
That is really cool.
structure that they built, and I would really like to go see it one day. Maybe I'll have to do that for the summer solstice this year. That could be cool.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like an Avatar when they needed the like one in like the tower to
Oh my God! Yeah, yeah, yeah. The sunstone had to hit like Roku's face or whatever
little
for the door
stone.
to open.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's basically the same idea, right? Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's awesome, though.
I guess
Yeah, I
it
don't.
is like very heavily tied to that in the entire arc of that
It
show.
is. Yeah, yeah.
Very
And so, like, I don't know. I just think it's super cool that like this group of people and a lot of groups of people at the time were just like really, really in tune with the movements of planets and stars and I mean, it's important. It's how you tell time back then. Yeah.
it's really
So,
interesting to show like the ancient human history of like always feeling the need to quantify time. Like
hmm yeah, yeah,
like you mentioned earlier, it could be like just like significant to like seasonal crops or like patterns of animal movement.
hmm
I think there is something to like recognizing the passage of time though and like keeping track of it just on like a survive, like an innate, like to keep your body and like mind okay. Like people that talk about like when you can't like see the sun and stuff and you have like no concept of
Mm,
time, like how much that
yeah.
fucks with your psyche.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think about too, like, all these important like age milestones that we see in a lot of cultures, like quinceanera, or like in America when you get your driver's license, all these different
Yes, those are the
life
same thing.
milestones that are, well, I know, that are tied to, and I know they're not like in any
I
way
thought you were gonna say
similar,
like
but
bat
they are
mitzvah.
like bat mitzvah. That's a good one. That's what I was looking for there, and I
I
couldn't think of
know.
another one. But like every culture has some kind of like age related,
Hmm.
celebration. We do birthdays, it's a whole thing, and you have like different celebrations throughout the year too. Like a lot of places celebrated the winter solstice. A lot of places would celebrate the um, summer solstice or the equinoxes as well. Like it, it's just how you track the time. It's how when to do your celebrations, when to do your harvest, when to plant, when the animals are going to come back from their migration. Yeah, I mean, humans need to know what time it is, I guess. And we do it with
Yeah.
external calendars. We don't keep track of it in our heads. We have built all these devices and uh, piled up rocks in such a way that they can show us what day it is.
I guess it is interesting because now I'm thinking about, are there any other species that are like marking time in some way? There must be.
Well,
Maybe.
there's. I mean,
I
but there's,
mean,
at least from what we know through research, if I'm correct, it's more of a like inherent behavioral pattern.
Yeah, like it's an innate like rhythms to things. Like I know that they
yeah.
have like the concept of like the passage of time and like when to do certain things, but there must be some other species
Okay,
that's like
well, hold on.
marking time in some way,
I don't
like
know if
not
there
just in their
are.
They,
behavior.
so there's no reason for them to quantify it the way that we need to.
Yes.
So they probably don't acknowledge it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
I mean,
think
it
like
definitely sense when like something's off, but that's just
hmm,
that's like they can tell just because they live so routine. It's easy for
I
them to
bet there's like a
understand when they're routine.
squirrel or like a crow out there somewhere though
I don't
stacking
know.
rocks every day.
Humans
There's
recording
gotta be
things
one.
is a really uniquely human thing that we
Yeah,
do.
I guess you're
Like other
right.
other animals don't
They're not
record
like sentimental.
things. Well, and
They're
I
not
think
taking a picture.
a huge part of like our evolutionary like advantage is the fact that we can transmit knowledge between humans even across generations, um, without needing to be there physically, right? So like the fact that we can record things has been like a huge
Mm-hmm.
adaptation for humans because it meant that knowledge could be passed on indirectly across generations and could happen outside of genetics too because genetics
Mm-hmm.
moves really slow.
Mhm.
Like I don't really think there is. I think this is something that is kind of uniquely human
Yeah, the
in a lot
ability
of
That's
ways.
cool.
social evolution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or at
Because
least unique to like hominids.
social kind of have
Yeah,
more in a more yeah
yeah,
society
because
based context.
because most other animals, I think they're mostly responding to environmental changes rather than keeping track of environmental
Yeah, or like
changes.
physiological
Yeah.
changes of some
Yeah,
kind.
yeah.
Like they're sensing something environmental or physiological that's like making a behavioral change.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's all I have on like the ancient history of eclipses. So now we want to just do one little brief thing on relatively modern history. This is such a sick picture. Let me
That
just
is a sick
say
pick.
this is
Sick
the
pick,
this is a
Nick.
Concorde flying in front of the solar eclipse in 1973. The Concorde, very famously, was a supersonic passenger airline, and in 1973 they flew a specific eclipse flight, and they managed to achieve 74 minutes of totality by like flying at multiple times the speed of sound along the eclipse path to stay in it for as long as possible, which I
That
don't
is
know,
not what
man.
I realized was going on in this
That
picture.
just seems like the coolest shit ever. And like,
Damn,
I think
some nerd got their dream. Some nerd
mhm,
thought of that and was like, wouldn't it
a
be
couple of
cool?
nerds actually, because they
Yeah, there were
used
a
the
lot of
flight.
nerds being like, wouldn't it be so cool? And they made it
they,
happen.
they used
Oh,
the flight to collect some scientific data as well.
Yeah, they had to get it funded somehow.
Yeah, exactly. But oh my god, could you imagine like being the pilot and getting 74 minutes of totality? Like that would be so sick.
no, but imagine being the friends of that guy who like didn't get to go, and then like argument, and then
Yeah.
well, I've experienced more totality than you have,
Right?
and
Or like you're
Yeah,
working on.
yeah, Nick, remember when you said you should never be looking at the sun for minutes at a time?
Okay, well, this is a rare exception,
I burned my records.
and they don't fly the Concorde anymore, so it still kind of stands.
They could
It's like,
fly the Concorde.
yeah, most total eclipses you only get like 3 to 4 minutes of totality. Like I think we got 4-ish where I was at in Texas when I saw it. But yeah, solar eclipses have been like a big moment for scientific discoveries. Sometimes, like they've been used to confirm Einstein's theory of relativity in a really cool way. Because what they
Explain how.
noticed, I will. What they noticed was that during totality, right, the sky gets dark. You can see the stars, you can see the planets, all that stuff, right? And what they were able to do is that they were able to see that some of the stars, especially like close to the sun, were slightly out of where they should be in the sky, right? Their position was slightly shifted. And the reason it was shifted is that the sun's gravity was actually bending the path of light as the light traveled past it. So they were appearing to be in a slightly different spot in the sky, which is exactly what you would predict with, I think it's general relativity,
What is
which
that?
it's one of Einstein's. So
Yeah,
there's
but what
general and special relativity. I don't
what is
remember the.
relativity?
It's Einstein
Because I don't
shit
understand how
about.
this is proving the theory of relativity because I don't know what the theory of relativity is.
So it's basically that the speed of light, or sorry, that all motion is relative to an observer, and like the speed of light is constant everywhere. And then there's some shit with like gravity working different than Newton's models would have predicted. I'm not the best person to be telling you
No,
about this,
no,
quite frankly.
really? Really? That wasn't the best explanation I could get? Okay.
uh, Sorry.
Well, at least you let me know.
I
No,
came prepared to talk about eclipses, not about
I think I
relativity
get the
today.
gist. I think I actually have enough information. I think I got the gist of that. I'm satisfied.
Cool.
Wait,
All
wait,
right.
hold on. Oh wait, never mind then.
Well, no, go ahead, Abby. Ask your question.
Okay.
You just might not get an answer.
Well, no, it wasn't a question. It was an answer.
What?
All right, next slide.
Yeah.
We have 10 minutes of recording time left.
Oh shit. Well, I think this is.
Worth it.
Yeah, I was just wanted to. Well, okay, I got two more things on some other
We're
science
doing
that
good
they've
then.
done.
We're doing good then.
Helium was discovered during a solar eclipse, hence the name helium. In 1868, they used a spectrometer to look at the sun's corona, and they noticed some new spectral lines that they hadn't noticed before. And they were like, "Oh my god, it's helium, new element," and they named it helium.
That's cool.
And then we've learned a bunch of other stuff about the composition of the sun's corona through studying solar eclipses. And also, like, I think we learned about solar flares and some other things like that. These days, what do we do during eclipses? Well, most of us,
We look at them.
we go outside and we put on these goofy little glasses and we stare up at them. And I've got a pair right here that you can see.
They're dark
And
as
if I
fuck.
put them up to the, yeah, you can't see shit through them. I think you can see my light. Nope, you can't see anything.
No, you can't see anything.
Yeah, they're super dark. Don't look at the sun with the naked eye. It's gonna burn your retina. It's not fun. These things are basically a thin layer of aluminum that you're staring through, and the sun is so bright that a little bit of its light manages to get through. And I don't know. I think like The stuff that we do for eclipses these days is really fun. Like when I saw the 2024 one, I was in Waxahachie, Texas, which is a pretty small town, but it was like right in the eclipse path. And I was visiting some friends and family in Texas, and this happened to be between Houston and Austin, where people lived. So I thought I'd stop in there for the day. And yeah, it
That's
was
really
really cool.
cool.
They had like music playing. They had like some local bands earlier, and then they played like Dark Side of the Moon right before Totality, and then during Totality, they turned off all the music, and it was just like listen, like
Yeah, it was so
observe, that kind of
quiet.
thing. But it was so cool to just like see the whole town like show up and go sit outside for a few hours and like look up at the sky and like
Hmm.
watch what was happening. Um, and yeah, it was a really cool day. I got that picture through the clouds too, which is really cool. Because sometimes you can look at the sun through the clouds and it won't burn your eyes, but you got to be careful with it.
Nick, stop advising people on how they could look on at the sun.
Yeah. And Kayla and Abby both saw the eclipse from Indiana, which was
Yo,
cool.
we
You guys
had
want to talk about
really great
that?
weather this day.
Yeah, you guys did.
It was like
You
a
were really lucky.
beautiful day.
It was really cool.
Yeah, in this picture of Noah, you can kind of see like the sunset that's happening.
Yeah,
Above
yeah,
us.
yeah. It's like dimmer on the horizon for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then we all
That's
got our goofy glasses on.
mm-hmm.
And then
And I
my
love your
grandma's
grandma with
also
the
featured
the
here.
welding
Yeah, she's
mask.
got her welding
So
mask
funny.
on. I
Yeah,
wonder if
if
that
you know what you're
works. I
if you know
feel
what
like
you're doing and you have a dark enough welding mask, you can use a welding mask to watch the eclipse. But you should
it must
know
have.
what you're
I
doing.
bet it worked. I gotta follow up.
Seemed like it did.
Yeah, this was a fun
But
day.
yeah,
It
I
was
don't know.
beautiful
It's
weather. I'm glad I experienced it. I definitely was like a naysayer, being like, this is way overhyped, but I was glad I experienced it.
Mhm.
I
If I
think a
get to
lot of
again,
people
I
feel that
will.
way,
But
right? It's hard to put
yeah.
into words like what you're going to experience if you ever go see a solar eclipse.
But
Because
even
if you
like
can
I saw the
describe it,
partial and I was like, that was nothing. Like
right?
whatever.
Yeah. And I've seen a partial, then I saw an annular, and then I saw the total. And the partial and the annular came absolutely nowhere close to
Mm-hmm.
just how like cool and interesting and like unique of an experience that the total solar eclipse was. Like if you ever have the opportunity to go see one, it's worth seeing one. Is how I feel about them.
I agree.
It felt
Yeah.
like the
I
whole
agree.
world like stood still for a little bit.
It really
It
did, right? Like,
did.
well, and I think, quite frankly, it kind of did, right? Like, a lot of cities just kind of like stopped and like people
Yeah,
pulled over
you're
to the
right.
side of the road and
Everyone kind of just stopped for a second and
they
like
did.
took in the world
Mhm.
together.
Everyone took a few minutes just to like
Look
hang
at the
out and
sky.
stare up at the sky together. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's there aren't very many things that happen these days
Because
where
we
everyone
we
is kind
literally
of
got the
just
day off of work for this.
yeah, that's awesome. I had to take off, but whatever. And that's all there is to my presentation. That's all I got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed.
Yay!
Yeah, thanks for
Eclipse,
listening,
eclipse,
everyone. We love
eclipse.
eclipses here.
Stamp of
Eclipses are
approval on
cool.
eclipses.
One of the oldest
Eclipses
traditions
podcast
in
approved.
human history is watching an eclipse. So
Staring at the stars, baby.
think about how many millions of people in the past have all stared up at an event like this together and been frightened or elated or whatever, but felt some kind of emotion. And you will definitely feel some kind of emotion seeing one
Yeah,
of
it was
these.
really cool.
All
Yeah, I
right.
remember Noah had made like a whole eclipse playlist that he had like timed for the movement across the sky.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, that was cool.
All right. Thanks for
Anything
listening,
else to
everyone.
add, anyone? Oh, yeah, we gotta shout our shit out.
Oh, we do.
You gotta follow us on Instagram. I'll post all of Nick's pictures from his
This
PowerPoint.
podcast counts.
This podcast counts. Is that what it's? Yeah, at
This
this
pod
pod
counts?
at this pod counts.
Yeah.
Same for that's the email address, and you can watch the YouTube video also if I figure out how to upload them. All right, bye guys.
All right. Bye.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Nick.
you,
That was
guys.
great. This was a fun episode.
It was.
Okay, I gotta find the music.
Yeah.
The outro music.
This podcast counts. Socializing. This podcast counts. It's socializing.